Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're continuing this morning. It's a longer section than yesterday, so I'm going to move quickly. Continuing with Canto 11, Chapter 10, text number 8. It's distinguishing the body from the coverings, and that's I and mind, clarity and clarification. Just as fire which burns and illuminates is different from firewood, which is to be burned to give illumination. Similarly, the seer within the body, the self-enlightened spirit soul, is different from the material body, which is to be illuminated by consciousness. Thus, the spirit soul and the body possess different characteristics and are separate entities. So we're going to go to Jiva Goswami's Paramatma Sandarbha. We read some section yesterday, and this is another section, two more sections, because of the importance that this verse has in understanding super soul, prakriti, the living entity, and the relationship. Anucheda 27, text 1. The individual soul is self-manifest. This is confirmed by the use of the words Swayam Prakash and Sarvadrik in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.10.8. So Swayam Prakash, self-manifesting, Sarvadrik, self-enlightened. As quoted here in Anucheda 19, text 12. So that was what we read yesterday. So that's Anucheda 19, where Anucheda is like, section 27. So he's weaving a theme, taking this verse and illuminating some points about Paramatma and his overseeing Prakriti. Manifestation is of two kinds. One, self-manifestation, where one is the seer. And two, manifestation where one is the object that is seen. Subject-object. That's grammar. Two kinds of manifestation. Next. The spirit soul should be understood in this way, the spirit soul has the power to light the lamp of the eyes and see various objects. Example, a clay pot or other inanimate object has no such power. In this way, the soul is, quote, self-manifest, Swayam Prakash, in contrast to Prakriti, clay pot, inferior energy, which means the soul has the power to manifest things before himself, or in other words, to perceive sense objects. If modern science could study this Sankhya philosophy, they would be better off in understanding things. Whatever does not have the power of perception is called inanimate, quote, inanimate matter, unquote, because it thus has the power to perceive itself and others. The soul is called self-manifest, Swayam Prakash. That is why the soul is said to be spiritual in nature. Next. Other thinkers say that, quote, self-manifest means, quote, the soul is independent in its actions. And still other thinkers say self-manifest, Swayam Prakash, means when something is not understood, the soul can act to try to understand it, unquote. In the first of these two ideas, so he's taking opponents say this and opponents say that, and he's going to, as you say in India, tackle it, address it. In the first of these two ideas of the soul's independence, refutes the idea that the soul is material, like a material lamp. This idea also affirms that the word swayam in Swayam Prakash means to oneself. Because the soul is thus different from a material lamp, it is clear that the word swayam here means to oneself. The second of these two ideas is clear in its meaning. In this way, it is clear that the word Swayam Prakash, meaning manifest to oneself, quote unquote, manifest to oneself, here has the same meaning as the word swadrik. Next. The Supersoul is not manifested by a source outside himself, as clay pots and other material objects are. Paramatma Sandarbha. So it's not, Paramatma is not a material entity, because he's not manifest out of something outside of himself. Because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul is not dependent on others for his being manifested. The Lord himself explains this in the following words of Srimad Bhagavatam 11:22, 30-31. That's a later section of Uddhava Gita. Quote, my dear Uddhava, my material energy, comprising three modes and acting through them, manifests the varieties of creation along with varieties of consciousness for perceiving them. No, material energy is manifesting varieties of consciousness. Now, it doesn't mean the soul isn't conscious. It means the varieties, according to the modes of material nature, are filtered or tainted or polluted. The pollutant is material nature, not the soul. I'll read the sentence. Uddhava, my material energy, comprising three modes and acting through them, material energy manifests the varieties of creation along with varieties of consciousness for perceiving them. The manifest results of material transformation is understood in three aspects: Adhyatmika, Adidaivaka, and Adibhautika. Now that's discussed in Bhagavad Gita also. We're used to hearing those terms in a very specific way. Different kleshas or miseries caused by Adhyatmika, Adidaivaka, Adibhautika. But there's, stepping back from that particular application, there's another. And he doesn't drill into it here, but he's mentioning sight, visible form, and the reflected image of the sun within the aperture of the eye all work together to reveal one another. But the original sun standing in the sky is self-manifested. Swayam Prakash. Similarly, the Supreme Soul, the original cause of all entities, who is thus separate from all of them, acts by the illumination of his own transcendental experience as the ultimate source of manifestation of all mutually manifesting objects. Remember this definition of, there are two types of manifestations: the subject and object, that which is seen and the seer. And then there's the Supersoul, who is the ultimate source of the seer and the seen. This verse, that's the verse where Krishna is speaking to Uddhava about his material energy, manifest varieties of creation, and varieties of consciousness. This verse describes vikalpa, or manifestation, veda, difference, and tad buddhi, the conceptions of things, tad buddhi, the conception of things. In this way, many different manifestations are created. This is described with the word vikarika. Vikarika. The word trividha indicates that three kinds of transformations are present before the gross material vision. Now, Jiva Goswami is taking, what's he doing in the Sandarbhas? He's taking concepts and going down and going down and drilling down and drilling down, then he comes back up again. So if you get lost when he goes down and down and down, don't worry about it. It's not like you can't go back to Godhead if you don't understand when he goes down and down. But it's science. It's like, this very simple example where the Bible says God created heaven and earth. And so God said, let there be light, and so there was. Let there be creation, and so there was. God said. So there's details to that. And then there's details to that, and there's details to that, and it's a very elevated science. Sankhya philosophy is very elevated. Especially attractive to Kapila Dev, because he teaches Sankhya philosophy, and what's behind all of the detail is Krishna comes out of a box. And one worships Krishna knowing the object, the source of all manifestations. And then it's with full knowledge. Now, one might say, well, that's good if you want to go to Vaikuntha, but what about if you want to go to Vrindavan, you don't need to know all this stuff. Well, Jiva Goswami is a Brajvasi, and he knows all this stuff. So it doesn't exclude you from higher stages of rasa because you're stuck in trying to understand details and details and details. But it's the absolute truth being revealed in the Bhagavatam. That's what he's doing with the Sandarbhas in different features. This is the Paramatma Sandarbha. And it is a big deal. What's the relationship between the source of all things and things? And it's complicated, isn't it? I mean, take anything. Like, let them make one mosquito. That can produce another mosquito. So maybe they can make a drone that can, go up and down and sideways and drink your blood. Maybe they'll make a drone that can do that. But to make drones, to do technology is very, very complicated. How many years of study does one need to go through to get technology down? But they don't reach the what's behind it. So this is spiritual technology. What's the push and pull, the cause and the effect of all things, and their source of emanation. It's advanced. It's the graduate study of Bhagavad Gita. So here we go. The word trividha indicates that three kinds of transformations are present before the gross material vision. These three kinds of manifestations are described in the passage beginning with the word adhyatma. You already quoted it, adhyatma. That's the translation back of text 30. The manifest results of material transformation is understood in three aspects: adhyatmika, adidaivika, adibhautika. It's just material transformations. I mean, there's prakriti, there's the control of prakriti, and there's transformations of prakriti. And the three transformations of prakriti are of these three categories, and then subcategories of those categories. These transformations, or manifestations that are but transformations of prakriti, are described one after another in three verses, Srimad Bhagavatam 11, 22, 31 through 33. Next. Here the word vapu means part. Atra randre means in the eyeball, on the eyeballs. The three manifestations thus work together, parasparam, to reveal each other, siddhyati, on the eyes. So if you want to be an optometrist and understand Sankhya, this will help you. Therefore, they are mutually dependent. They are not self-manifested and independent. However, the sun, arkaha, in the sky, is self-manifesting, swatak siddhyati. Even in the eye's sphere of perception, the sun does not need any other thing in order to be manifested, therefore it is self-manifested. Swatak. One more in this Anuchet. This verse explains this one, 11:22, text 30. As the sun is self-manifested, so the Supersoul is self-manifested also. So he's going to something else and saying how, to understand what does self-manifested mean, here's what it means. As the sun is self-manifested, Paramatma is self-manifested. What does self-manifested mean? So there's something that's not and something that is. There's the ultimate self-manifested, and then the sense of self-manifested as the soul, because the soul is not independent, the soul is dependent, but self-manifested. What does that self-manifested mean? Does it mean there's no Paramatma, there's only Atma, that's sufficient? What does it mean, self-manifested? Swayam Prakash. Like the sun, that's what it means. So, as the sun is self-manifested, so the Supersoul is self-manifested also, unquote. Here the word yat means because of the previously stated example. Esham means of the three things that begin with adhyatma. And yo para adyaha means the shelter of them. There's a cause behind other causes. Those other causes are effects of the original cause. And Paramatma is that original cause of the effects that then become causes of other things. So as the Supersoul is self-manifested, other things are not. In this way, the Supersoul is self-manifested. The Lord acts by His own transcendental experience, Svayanubhutya. The Lord acts by His own transcendental experience because He is perfectly spiritual in nature. He is not only the cause of His own manifestation, but He is also the cause of the manifestation of the many mutually dependent beings. The puzzle pieces start to become more clear. But he's not just making statements, he is supporting his statements based on scriptural statements and helping us understand how to unpack the scriptural statement. What's the meaning of it? That is his nature. This verse quoted in this Anucheda was spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's 2.5 pages, and there's 5 more to go. Anucheda 28, text 1. Therefore, the soul is manifested from the Lord's internal potency. You know, the origin of the Jiva question. Each soul has one nature, like a lamp. The nature of the soul is described in these words of Srimad Bhagavatam 11.3.38, previously quoted in Anucheda 22. This is 11.3.38, which is Narada speaking to Vasudeva in Dwarka. Quote, the soul was never born, it will never die, it never grows, it never decays. The soul is the witness, observing the changes, time forces on changeable things. The soul is conscious, existing always and in every situation. We read this yesterday. So it's Bhagavad Gita, graduate study, text 2. This is Anucheda 28, Paramatma Sandarbha. Thus the soul is spiritual and conscious. As a lamp or other luminous object lights up a certain place, so the soul lights up the body with consciousness. This example is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this morning's verse, 11.10.8. In this verse, the word prakash means, quote, the source of consciousness. So Swayam Prakash. What's the source of the consciousness of the Jiva? The Jiva. Prabhupada's way. The soul is both conscious and consciousness. There's no distinction. There is a distinction between, let's say, the sun and the sunshine. There's no distinction between conscious and consciousness. Okay, here we go. Text 3. That the supersoul is all-pervading will be explained later. In this book, when Prahlad's words of Srimad Bhagavatam 7:6, 19 through 23 will be quoted. So he says, connecting dots. Supersoul is all-pervading. Here the word Vyapaka. Prabhupada named one of his disciples Vyapaka. Vyapaka. Nice devotee. Vyapaka here means that the supersoul subtly enters the heart of all living beings. One reason this is so is that the Lord's nature is like that, as explained in the words Jnana Matramako Na Cha. He is not only transcendental knowledge. Transcendental knowledge is everywhere because the Lord is everywhere, and that's his nature. Another reason is that because he is spiritual and full of bliss, therefore the Lord appears as the supersoul. Text 4. Because he is free from any trace of matter, the supersoul is filled with transcendental knowledge. Because he is free from suffering, the supersoul is filled with knowledge and bliss. Because he is thus filled with transcendental knowledge and bliss, the supersoul is the abode of limitless transcendental love. This is explained in the following words of the Bhagavatam, Brahma's prayers, 10:14-54, towards the end. Therefore, This is the translation. Therefore, it is the supersoul that is most dear to every embodied living being, and it is simply for the satisfaction of the supersoul that the whole material creation of moving and non-moving entities exists. Simply for the satisfaction of supersoul. The meaning of this verse is clear. This verse was spoken by Shukadeva Goswami. Okay, so now we're going to go to another text. And this other text is, the style is different. There's some similarity. It's Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The title of this literature is Amnaya Sutra. Amnaya means scripture. Sutra means code. So he just makes a statement, a code. Sutra number this and sutra number that. And then his system is he takes statements from the Vedas that illuminate that sutra. So the sutra is his sutra, it's not Vedanta Sutra, but it's a declaration. Boom. And then verses support and illuminate that sutra. It's different than what Jiva Goswami does. Sutra 34. The souls have the quality of being knowers of knowledge. Commentary. In the Mundaka Upanishad, it is said, quote, the soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. Not with your eyes, but with intelligence, one can perceive. The atomic soul is floating in 5 kinds of air. You know what those 5 kinds of air are. Prana, Apana, Vyana, Samana, and Udana. The atomic soul is floating in 5 kinds of air, is situated within the heart, and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. That influences consciousness. In Srimad Bhagavatam, this morning's verse, it is said, quote, this is 11.10.8, just as fire, which burns and illuminates, is different from firewood, which is to be burned to give illumination, similarly the seer within the body, the self-enlightened spirit soul, is different from the material body, which is to be illuminated by consciousness. Thus, the spirit soul and the body possess different characteristics and are different entities. In his commentary on Vedanta Sutra, Srila Baladev Vijayabhusan explains, quote, by its nature the soul possesses knowledge. So the sutra, that's it for Sutra 34. So the sutra again is, the souls, plural, have the quality of being knowers of knowledge. So they have knowledge and they're knowers of knowledge, conscious and consciousness. Sutra 35. Because they rebelled against the Supreme Lord, they have entered into ignorance. The fall of the Jiva. The source of origin of the Jiva and the fall of the Jiva. Here we go. In the Mundaka Upanishad, it is said, quote, the individual spirit soul and the super soul, Supreme Personality God, are like 2 friendly birds sitting in the same tree. One of the birds, the individual atomic soul, is eating the fruits of the tree, parentheses, the sense gratification afforded by the material body, and the other bird, the super soul, is not trying to eat those fruits, but is simply watching his friend, unquote. Although the 2 birds are on the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree, But if in some way or other he turns his face to his friend, who is the Lord, and knows his own glories, at once the suffering bird becomes free of all anxieties. Reference, Srimad Bhagavatam 11:2-37. Now, actually, that other reference may not have been Narada to Yudhishthira, it was the Navayogendras to King Nimi. Okay, so 11:2-37. When the living entity is attracted by the material energy, which is separate from Krishna, he is overpowered by fear. This is this Bhayam Ditriyam, Abhiniveshitakshat. When the living entity is attracted by the material energy which is separate from Krishna, he is overpowered by fear. Because he is separated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the material energy, his conception of life is reversed. Unquote. In other words, instead of being the eternal servant of Krishna, he becomes Krishna's competitor. This is called Viparyayo Smriti. Then he quotes a song, Bengali song. The author is Sri Nayananda Das. Don't know who that is. It's saying the same thing. Plunged by their materialistic deeds into the terrible darkness of Kali Yuga, the people cannot find the Chintamani jewel of Lord Gaura's mercy. Oh, my brother, no one has told you the glories of Lord Gaura? How great is Lord Brahma? How great is Lord Shiva? They are not as great as Lord Gaura. What use are the four Vedas and the 6 systems of philosophy if one does not worship Lord Gauranga? Why study them? What use is a mirror to a blind man? If one knows the 2 kinds of Vedic knowledge, he still does not know anything. But if one knows Lord Gauranga, he knows the most precious knowledge. Nayananda says, such a person knows everything, all perfections stay in the palm of his hand. So, again, that sutra was because they rebelled against the Supreme Lord, they have entered into ignorance. Sutra 36. They are bewildered about their own identity. Commentary. Brihat Aranyaka Upanishad. As, coming to the end of one leaf, a snail transfers itself to another, so the soul leaves one body and enters another. Next is same Brihat Aranyaka. As a goldsmith takes one gold object and fashions it into another, so the soul leaves one body and attains another, a better body, the body of a Pita, a Gandharva, a Deva, Prajapati, Brahma, or other exalted beings. Next reference is Srimad Bhagavatam 3:30, text numbers 4 and 6. Quote, the living entity, in whatever species of life he appears, finds a particular type of satisfaction in that species, and he is never averse to being situated in such a condition. Such satisfaction with one's standard of living is due to a deep-rooted attraction for body, home, children, animals, wealth, and friends. In such association, the conditioned soul thinks himself quite perfect. Quoting Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 20, it is said, the conditioned soul cannot revive his Krishna consciousness by his own effort. That's worth repeating. The conditioned soul cannot revive his Krishna consciousness by his own effort. Doesn't mean we don't make effort, but that's not sufficient. Sutra 37. This is quick. It's very different style. Sutra 37. They suffer in bondage created by material activities. So the suffering is caused due to ignorance, material activities. Brihat Aranyaka Upanishad says, as the spirit soul acts, so he becomes. If he acts piously, he becomes a saint. If he performs sins, he becomes a rogue. If he is pious by saintly deeds and a sinner by sins. Bhagavatam 3:37, chapter 30, text 7. Although he is always burning with anxiety, such a fool always performs all kinds of mischievous activities with a hope which is never to be fulfilled in order to maintain his so-called family and society. Mahaprabhu explains Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 22. In this way, the conditioned soul becomes the servant of lusty desires, and when these are not fulfilled, he becomes the servant of anger and continues to be kicked by the external energy Maya. I mean, some appreciation, these saintly persons, they have at their fingertips, they don't have a computer. They have, a very capable memory that can just access things. And, which means as they're studying or reading or hearing or something, a light goes on, and they know how it fits into the big picture. So we're not like that. We're struggling just to follow what's going on here. But how did they get to where they are? And by doing at least some part of. So it's being simplified because we don't have to study for umpteen hours. It's just they're cherry picking verses that's stitched together, help us understand what's what. And the what's what is from this morning's verse, the distinction between the soul and the body. And they have distinct qualifications or qualities or characteristics. And what are those characteristics? It's being spelled out. And then, the relationship with Supersoul. Sutra 38. Because he falsely identifies with the gross and subtle material bodies, the soul suffers in the world of birth and death. Commentary. In Katha Upanishad, quote, following the path of ignorance, even though they think themselves very wise, blind fools become leaders of others. In this way, the blind lead the blind. Bhagavatam 3:14. The foolish family man does not become averse to family life, although he is maintained by those whom he once maintained. Deformed by the influence of old age, he prepares himself to meet ultimate death. And again, Madhya Lila, chapter 20. The illusory energy Maya gives the living entity all kinds of misery in his material existence. The last statement. In the material condition, so this is Bhakti Vinod, not scripture. In the material condition, the living entity is sometimes raised to higher planetary systems and material prosperity, and sometimes drowned in a hellish situation. His state is exactly like that of a criminal, whom a king punishes by submerging him in water and then raises him up again from the water. I can breathe again. Sound familiar? Sutra 39. By turning to the Lord and becoming favorable to him, the soul attains his original form and thus becomes free of all troubles. Commentary by Bhakti Vinod. She starts with Upanishads. Svetashvatara. By understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a person becomes free from all material bondage, his sufferings perish, and he escapes the cycle of repeated birth and death. Next, Mundaka Upanishad, quote, then the individual spirit soul becomes enlightened. Then he sees the effulgent Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Creator of all, casting away the reactions of all pious and sinful deeds. Now, pure and untouched by matter, the individual soul becomes liberated like the Lord himself. And just two more quotes. Vishnu Dharma Purana, quote, after thousands of births spent in austerity, study, and meditation, when all their sins are completely destroyed, the living entities can attain devotional service to Lord Krishna, if they have good fortune of contacting a devotee. They can. Last quote is for this morning, Bhagavatam 3.9.6. O my Lord, the people of the world are embarrassed by all material anxieties. They are always afraid. They always try to protect wealth, body, and friends. They are filled with lamentation and unlawful desires and paraphernalia, and they avariciously base their undertakings on the perishable conceptions of my and mine. As long as they do not take shelter of your safe lotus feet, they are full of such anxieties. And actually, there's one more. Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita, and that's it for this morning. If the conditioned soul becomes Krishna conscious by the mercy of saintly persons who voluntarily preach scriptural injunctions and help him to become Krishna conscious, the conditioned soul is liberated from the clutches of Maya, who gives him up. Yay! You better find those very merciful souls that can take the time out and find you somewhere in the dark place and give Krishna consciousness. And then once you have received, you can assist them. That's our lives in relation to our founder, Acharya, who did exactly that. So I told you in the beginning it would be a little long, and I kept my word. It's now 22 minutes after the hour. Let's see if there's some discussion. We have a hand up, and he's fixing batteries. Go ahead. We're on. It's on.
So the soul is part of the internal potency of the Lord. And so it is discussed that, when you hear that, you feel that, you have learned so many times that the soul it is qualitatively the same as the Supreme Lord.
Yes.
And yet it is discussed that because of its inherent quality, so just like the gold or silver, something reflecting the light which is coming to it. Similarly, the soul reflects back. I don't understand that, because isn't soul by itself anyway having that same quality as that of the Supreme Lord? And what is this reflecting back? The nature itself is same as the Supreme.
Well, it's a simple response is achintya bheda bheda tattva. Or we're dependent. The fiery quality of a spark is dependent upon the fire from which it comes. Our consciousness is not absolutely independent, we're dependent. Our consciousness is ours, and it's this qualitatively the same as the Supreme. And it's dependent. It's dependent, depending upon, where we direct that consciousness. Like the spark falling on water, it's extinguished. The spark falling on land, the spark falling on leaves. The fiery quality is dependent. So similarly, the qualitatively one, but very, very tiny, quantitatively different. So the inherentness of, let's say, consciousness, we are conscious. We have the potential or capacity to be conscious, and it's dependent. One of the things that Prabhupada would say often, you want to see God, but what's the use of your eyes? If the light goes out, you can't see anything. Your seeing power is limited and dependent. So we're conscious, but we can't be conscious unless the circumstances are, we can't be conscious of objects, and we can't be conscious of Krishna without mercy. So we're qualitatively one, quantitatively different. It's an important distinction, and it's not so easy to understand, but that's my explanation. You're not satisfied. I can see in your face you're not satisfied. Someone else? Yes.
Maharaj, in Bhagavad Gita 7:15, Krishna says, Naradama, Dushkritis and Mudas, they do not surrender unto the Lord. In yesterday's morning...
Is the button on? Go ahead.
Should I have to repeat, Madam?
Yeah, I can hear. Go ahead.
Okay. So in yesterday's morning class, you mentioned Krishna fulfills the desire of the living entity so that he goes back to Krishna. So does that apply for the person who is surrendered or even to these?
Well, I want to see the context of the statement that you're referring to, because Krishna doesn't interfere with living entities' free will. Supposing a living entity doesn't want Krishna, he doesn't interfere with that.
But he is the super soul fulfilling even their desires, right?
But supposing the living entity's desire is to be separate, or forget him, or compete with him, or something. Krishna doesn't interfere with that. There has to be voluntary choice to go to Krishna, or you don't go to Krishna. Okay?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I'm trying to frame this question. The soul in false identification experiences a varieties of upadhis, like strong, intelligent, this or that. There's a feeling of worthlessness in service to Krishna.
Feeling of which?
Worthlessness.
Worthlessness.
Yes. Is also an upadhi, or it
Of course. Influenced by a certain unfriendly mode of nature. It's an upadhi. It's not the soul. That's an upadhi. Any more than being, special. That's an upadhi. Okay?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay.
Guru Maharaj, I'm trying to understand, let me say it differently. I had the conception that unless I work, I will not get the food.
Not get the
Food,
food.
anything. So when we hear, like you quoted Prabhupada saying that, what's the power of your seeing? And if the light is not there, we cannot see. So does it mean like trusting in Krishna means he can enable even if the power of light is not there, like that's what I'm trying to understand.
I don't understand what you're trying to understand. The question is not clear.
Like light needs to be on for me to see, like trusting.
Our seeing is dependent. That's the point.
Okay.
We're not independent in our seeing.
And we need to do the practical things. We need to do the practical things.
Of course. And that is also dependent. To do what does become get the result? It's dependent. We're dependent. Any way you look at it. Krishnamurti knows all about it. That discussion, that celebrated topic, covered many times. She can.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All Gurus, Srila Prabhupada. How to have a teenage child practice spirituality, how to get them into this and keep them continue, just need your advice there. Thank you.
Parenting question.
Yes, Maharaj.
Souls have free will. Ask Govinda Mohini. Souls have free will. They're making choices. You have free will. You can't make anyone do anything because they have free will. So you can try to make favorable circumstances so that the free will choice is available. And, being a good example really helps. Having wholesome friends that are making wise choices is very, very important. Doing things together that are related to wholesomeness is a nice support also. Getting too much involved in trying to steer the free will choices, especially with teenagers, can create the opposite. Anything else? We have online questions.
It's Uttama Shloka Prabhu. In the original sense, are there different types of souls in reference to Madhva or Ramanujacharya lineage?
Do you understand the question? Is the question to say, are there categories of souls that are Madhva souls and another category of souls that are Ramanuja souls, and is that what the question is? Is that what the question is? Is that the question? If that's not the question, whoever is asking the question can rephrase the question. But if the answer is no.
Kirti Prabhu's questions.
Who?
Kirti Prabhu.
Kirti.
Can spirit soul is spiritual and is superior to matter? Can the spirit soul interact with material nature without gross material body?
Well, Narada Muni did. Krishna did. And Krishna's associates. Ghosts do.
The next question from Kirti Prabhu. Does the liberated soul have individual nature beyond Sat, Chit and Ananda? Is this individuality based on their unique relationship with the
Yeah,
Lord?
I mean, that's one frame of reference. Rasa is another frame of reference. And there's so many other frames of reference that are uniquenesses about individual souls and their spiritual identity.
And third question. It looks like knowledge is intrinsic to the soul.
Yes.
What kind of knowledge do the souls have? Is this knowledge covered by ignorance by Krishna? Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that remembrance and forgetfulness or ignorance comes from Krishna. Then to reinstate the position of knowledge, mere knowledge is not sufficient. Krishna's mercy is essential. Is this understanding right?
You get like 16 different things, but it sounds, I mean, as far as I could follow, sounds right. Next.
This is from Kiran Tyagi Mataji. What happens to the soul during a heart transplant?
During heart transplant, it continues to exist in the region or the cavity of the heart. So it's like a machine part gets changed out. And when the new machine part stays in, is placed in, the soul is within that new machine part because it's in the region of the soul, region of the heart, not in that machine part.
This is from Megha Mataji. Is there a face to the soul in the spiritual world? And what type of face, if so?
Face?
Face.
Face?
Is there?
F-A-C-E?
Yeah.
Depends on the living entity, what type of face. There's form, and forms generally have face. And some the trees may not have a face, but
So Uttama Bhakta Prabhu is clarifying. Are there different categories of souls? It was once mentioned that Madhvacharya supports this idea of
oh
different
yes,
categories.
Madhvacharya definitely says that. It's different. What Madhvacharya says is different on this topic. Is different than what Chaitanya, what all the other sampradayas say. Srila Prabhupada,